And they're back. Just 10 months after the last appearance together on this stage, the parties are again looking for your vote in Thursday's Assembly election. Tonight, they answer questions from our studio audience. Welcome to the Northern Ireland Leaders' Debate. Good evening. Little did we think we'd be back here so soon, but this second election in a year has been brought about by a breakdown in the Stormont power-sharing coalition. It's about alleged corruption and unionist arrogance, say Sinn Féin. No, it's about insatiable Republican demands and opportunism, say the Democratic Unionists. The other main players invoke plagues on both coalition parties. Welcome to the Leaders' Debate. And those leaders are, for the Social Democratic and Labour Party, Colm Eastwood. The newly appointed Sinn Féin leader at Stormont, Michelle O'Neill. The leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Arlene Foster. Mike Nesbitt of the Ulster Unionists. And for the Alliance Party, Naomi Long. The questions tonight come from our studio audience, most of them party supporters, but we've also made room for voters who haven't yet made up their minds. We hope tonight's debate will help them decide. It's a pleasure also to welcome viewers across the UK on the BBC News channel. If you'd like to join the discussion, you can tweet using hashtag BBCNIDebate. So let us get stuck straight into it. Our first question comes from Kirsty Meredith, who's a quality analyst in a software company. Kirsty.
From the RHI scandal, what has been the most important lesson you've learned?
The RHI scandal for our network viewers. It's a green energy scheme similar to one run in the rest of the United Kingdom, but with one significant difference. There was no cap put on the money that investors could make from their investment. So, for example, for every pound that you spent on renewable energy, you get £1.60 back for the next 20 years. Now, this is potentially going to cost the Northern Ireland Assembly something like £500 million. So that's the RHI scandal, the renewable heat incentive. Arlene Foster, what have we learnt from this?
Well, of course, it's not going to cost the Northern Ireland taxpayer potentially or otherwise £500 million, because the reality is there are cost controls now in place that were put in place by the Assembly. And there's also now a public inquiry set up which will get to the truth and the facts of the matter, because up until now all we've had is political smears. We've had numerous allegations, plenty of rumours, but we've been devoid of facts, and I'm very pleased that the public inquiry has now been set up and we can get to those facts.
Well, there have been lots of facts brought about. The fact is that this scheme was allowed to go the way it did up until October 2015, that people were, in those last few weeks before the cap was put on, before the rates were changed, there was a spike in people. 900 new people signed up. People thought this was a really good deal. It was far too good a deal, wasn't it?
And the public inquiry will get to the bottom of all of that, indeed.
Yes, but you can say now that it was too good a deal.
I called for an independent inquiry. Well, we're all operating with the benefit of hindsight. I mean, obviously, if we had had the benefit of hindsight when the scheme was set up, then this wouldn't have happened. I think what's important now is...
Or the benefit, some would say, of sensible controls when it was set up.
With the benefit of hindsight. And, of course, what we need to do now is to allow the public inquiry to run its course and to get to the bottom of all of these issues.
All right. To the extent where you didn't mention it at the launch of your party manifesto, when it is what so many people have been talking about for the past few months, you didn't even deem it worthy of a mention.
Well, of course, Noel, this election has been brought about by lots of other things, and the RHI has been the excuse, but it has not been the cause of this election. The cause of this election, of course, is the wish of Sinn Féin to implement their radical Republican agenda on Northern Ireland. And what we want to see at the election is a very clear choice, and that choice is between either the Democratic
But why didn't you even
Party
mention it at
Sinn
the
Féin.
launch of your manifesto? It is such a significant issue for so many people.
Because it's not the cause of the election. It is the excuse.
I didn't say you should have
election.
mentioned it as the cause of the election. You didn't mention it at all.
Well, the public inquiry is going to deal with all of those matters now, Noel, and that is good, because people of Northern Ireland need to get to the bottom of this. I share their frustration. frustration. I share their anger. What we need to get now are some facts instead of the political insinuations which have been devoid of facts.
Michelle O'Neill, as Agriculture Minister, your department had 58 workshops on the incentive, even as late as October 2015, at that spike period. These workshops stressed the financial benefits of it. Do you think you've got completely clean hands in all of this?
I do, absolutely. And I think that, I don't know where Arlene's been living for the past number of months, but this election is very clearly about cash for ash, RHI scandal, potentially seeing the drip feed of £500 million out of the block grant. And
Arlene, even by your own admission, it's about many other things as well.
But if you let me finish this point, it is absolutely about RHI. It's about arrogance. It's about how the DUP have handled the issue. It's about the fact that Arlene couldn't even be humbled to accept that she's made a mistake. And whilst we will get to the bottom of all the issues with the public inquiry, there's some things that we do know to be factful and to be true, and that's the fact that Arlene did strip out the cost controls. And I listened to Arlene Max Lyrical about how the DUP have got this under control. They haven't got it under control. They put a stick and plaster on it for 1 year. So that's a big issue of concern.
But what about your department's involvement in it?
Sorry?
What about your department, that when you were head of the Department of Agriculture? What about, 58 workshops saying this is a fantastic scheme, get in on it?
And I'm very happy to answer that and have done any time, Noel. The workshops that were held were all about renewable energy. They promoted a scheme which, as far as I was concerned, or anybody else, any other party apart from the DUP were concerned, was a fine scheme. Once I knew about it, once my party knew about it, action was taken, and within 10 days the scheme was shut down. Whilst other parties actually voted to keep the scheme open, namely the DUP and the Ulster Unionist Party.
So you didn't know any of the details? You didn't know any of the details from 2010
and actually, and let me point out why that's a problem and why the institutions have collapsed. It's because the DUP very clearly, and we've heard it from counterclaim and claim from within the DUP, from Johnny Bell in particular, that the DUP were withholding information from their government partners.
No.
So if Kirsty asked about what lessons could you learn,
OK, I'll let Arlene Foster come back on that.
Won't withstand it.
Well, of course, Martin McGuinness was fully aware of the scheme in January of 2016.
On the 5th of February.
That's months before the last Assembly election. Why was this not an issue at the last Assembly election?
I'm happy to answer that.
Why was that not an issue at the last Assembly election? And we've heard Michelle saying that the DUP wanted to keep the scheme open. It was the DUP that proposed the closure of the scheme actually in February of 202016. So she's getting her facts wrong.
I'll let you come back. I want to bring the others in. What lessons? I will let you come back on it. What lessons, Colm Eastwood, are to be learned?
Well, Arlene doesn't seem to have learned any lessons by the sound of the words coming out of her tonight. I think it's a disgrace in the way that we've got to this situation. And of course, what Arlene did in setting up this scheme is she changed the scheme from the British model to take out the cost controls. And that has to be remembered. And it's good now we've got a public inquiry. Of course, both Arlene and Sinn Féin opposed a public inquiry when we all called for it. But Arlene's right about Arlene's. We didn't vote to keep this scheme open. We voted to keep a scheme open that had the cost controls in it, and we voted to keep a scheme open.
You voted to keep the scheme open, and your party actually said we were shameful for closing it down.
Well, let me just make this point. I agree with Arlene Foster on one thing on RHI. Sinn Féin knew either last January or last February. Was it February? Last February. We went into an election, and they didn't tell the public the full extent of the black hole in the finances. They didn't tell us when we went into a negotiation about the programme for government. In fact, we were able to meet every single permanent secretary in the Northern Ireland Civil Service, apart from one, the Finance Department. They wouldn't let us meet the Finance Permanent Secretary.
There was no request.
Why was that? There was a request. That's
no
not true. There was a request to meet every single Permanent Secretary, and they wouldn't let us. Now I think we know why. There's now a huge black hole in the public finances, and we got here because of arrogance, we got here because of mismanagement, and what we have to do is learn the lessons, as the questioner asked. One of the first things we need to do is curb the number of special advisors that we have. Far too many for a place of this size. Curb their pay and curb their power. That would be a damn good start in solving some of the problems that we have in our public, government.
Naomi Long, lessons to be learned from RHI.
Well, I think the first lesson that we can all learn from it is that if you elect people on the false premise that they're going to go into the executive to defend unionism or nationalism, they may not be the best people fit to actually run a government, because what they're not fighting for in this election is on the basis of their ability, their competence and their scrutiny of what's going on. So from my perspective, I think it's fairly clear. What we need to learn from this is to elect people who we believe can actually deliver.
Well, we can only elect people
government.
who stand.
You've got to elect people who are going to deliver good government, and I believe that there are people who are standing, not least in my own party, but also in other parties, who are capable and competent to deliver good government. That should be the basis on which we make decisions in this election, not some kind of sham fight between unionism and nationalism.
Yes, but how does that relate specifically to RHI?
Well, it relates specifically to RHI because what we heard at the last election was that we needed a strong leader of unionism, but that same strong leader of unionism presided over chaos within this scheme, presided over chaos in terms of how it was handled, and didn't actually deal with
and this
the
is
crisis.
chaos with hindsight.
No, it's not chaos with hindsight. It's chaos in the here and now, because actually when this was raised as part of the executive issues coming over the last number of months, it could have been handled better. It could have been handled differently. It could have been handled within government without an election if people had been willing to work through those issues, but they failed to do that because, as I say, the basis on which people seek election is not on their competence and fitness to govern. It's traditionally been on trying to frighten people into voting for them. If you vote in that basis, then you may not get the best people able to run the government.
Mike Nisbet.
I think it's worth pointing out to your audience, particularly in Great Britain, Noel, that this is costing £85,000 a day. £85,000 going up in smoke needlessly.
Some controls have been introduced, of course, already on that.
Well, I think the difficulty with saying that we can control this, as Arlene Foster is claiming, is that people in good faith went to the banks, borrowed significant money to buy the kit, the new boilers, and the banks were in receipt of a letter from Mrs Foster saying that this is a good thing and saying that the tariffs were grandfathered and that they would not be changed under any circumstances over the remaining 19 years of the scheme. So there is a huge problem there. If there is a lesson to be learnt, it is this. We need an end to 10 years of government hallmarked by incompetence, arrogance, cronyism and the strong whiff of corruption. It is time for change. OK.
Now, a couple of issues there for you both. Michelle O'Neill, even as late as February of last year, Conor Murphy said that he wanted the RHI scheme kept open for 2 more weeks. So that was after the limits had been put on, that the new tariff had been established. But he still wanted, as Colin Eastwood says, there was an election looming, and still Sinn Féin were supporting this scheme.
Well, let's just be very clear again to clear up some of the things that Colm said. As soon as I became aware on the 5th of February, so also did Colm's minister in the executive. It is absolutely true. We voted to shut the scheme down.
At the executive, so it never came to the executive.
We voted to shut the scheme down straight away within 10 days.
Why didn't you tell the public about it when we did the election?
And Sinn Féin, along with all the other parties, voted to keep the scheme open for 2 more weeks to allow those small contractors who committed money and who were going to go bankrupt, to allow them a chance to deal with their backlog. Then the other parties voted to keep the scheme open.
It's a different scheme.
At this stage, the public purse was already committed to a serious flow out money of £500 million, and they wanted to keep going.
But you didn't come out and say this has been a scandal, we're going to bring the government of Northern Ireland down over this.
We participated very responsibly in the Public Accounts
That's why they had to close
Committee.
it. That's what they told us.
Conor Murphy actually brought the issue to the Auditor Controller, so we participated
But why
very
in
well.
December, a few months later, is it the issue over which you say you brought down the Assembly?
Let me tell you why. The reason was Johnny Bell made a claim, made a public appearance on a media show to tell the world that the DUP were up to their necks in trying to hide the flaws of the scheme, that they knew about it from the July previous. So, of course, Martin McGuinness had to act. And whilst other people stood
He
the
didn't know any of that before?
No, absolutely he didn't. And as soon as we were made aware of it, and as soon as Johnny Bell did his programme, and we had all the other claims from within the DUP among themselves about what had happened, Martin McGuinness acted, and Martin McGuinness shut the scheme down. He was the only person, Sinn Féin was the only person that could shut or could actually deal with the issue of the DUP and their arrogance and how they actually responded to the public. People are angry. We spent the last 6 weeks on the doors talking to people. People are absolutely angry at the arrogance, the disrespect, the contempt for the public, and the fact that the DUP can't even recognise that they did something absolutely wrong.
Arrogance, disrespect and contempt, Arlene Foster.
Well, I also have to deal with the allegations of corruption as well, because, of course, there have
been plenty of allegations.
There's not a scintilla
Nothing more than that.
There's not a scintilla of evidence, and everybody on this platform
but plenty of allegations.
But here's the reality. Would it not have been more intelligent, would it not have been better to have had the public inquiry first and then had the election? Because then we would have had the full facts for everybody to make a judgment. Instead, what we've had is political manoeuvring by Sinn Féin. And what about a wee bit of respect, Michelle? Just saying. Just saying. What we need
about
to
respect
do,
for the public,
what we
Arlene?
need to do is to have. What we need to do, instead of all of the smears, the political smearing that have gone on, I may be the target in all of this, but it's the people of Northern Ireland that are the victims in all of this.
Okay.
Because we don't have a budget, we have a health service with waiting lists going up all of the time, and the health minister seems to be quite content with that.
I want to bring a couple of members of the audience in. Gentleman at the back there, please.
I accept that all the politicians and all the leaders need to know as much as they possibly can. But what I can't understand is how the government members in particular, who have the inside track, don't seem to have communicated with each other about this. They don't even seem to have informed each other. It seems to be hidden by them. It could have been out before the last election, and it wasn't.
Well, I mean,
and here we are having an election on the basis of this again.
It's quite simple to answer. When this first happened, when the RHI scheme first went through in Stormont, it went through as a scheme that only pertained to one department, and therefore it didn't require executive sign-off. When it got into trouble and it became a scheme that affected the entire executive on the basis of the finances, it was taken through by emergency procedure. And so it never came in front of the executive.
Well,
so other colleagues who sat on the executive were not informed of how bad the scheme was. Worse than that, they were lied to in the chamber because people stood up at the time when the scheme was closing and said it was being closed because it was a runaway success, when in fact it was a catastrophic failure of government. Now, when you lie to your colleagues in government and you don't share the full facts, you can't start after
to be
the
fair,
event.
it was
and
a
share the
success
blame.
because there was a huge take-up of what was seen to be, for a long time, a very good scheme.
Well, it wasn't a success in the sense that it wasn't actually delivering what people wanted. I don't think anybody believes it was good for the environment. The people were running boilers 24/7 with windows open. I don't think anybody believes that it was a good success for the environment, that people were being incentivised to use more fuel rather than less. All of those things were flaws within the scheme, but the point of this is it was not brought to the executive.
But no, it was brought to the floor
was-
of the Assembly and actually scrutinised by the DETI committee. So it's wrong
you can
to say
only
that it
scrutinise the
was
information you're
absolutely
given.
wrong to say
Let me
that it
bring a
wasn't
few more
on
members of
the
the audience
Daddy
in.
Committee,
Ladies
Arlene.
and gentlemen, please. Yes,
You
sir.
don't, but
I've been
everybody else
following this.
has.
I'm somewhat curious. I signed for a mortgage a number of years ago. It's since paid off. Now, I signed to pay so much money over a certain period of time. I don't recall that I could just walk into the bank and say, sorry, I've changed my mind, I'm not paying anymore. Now, I can't understand how the government can sign up on the dotted line, people can take out a contract with the government on a scheme that was backed by we even had letters to the lenders.
You don't know how
and
they
now
can
all
change
of a sudden
it.
it's going to be scrapped and they're going to be told, oh, you're getting a less amount of money.
I don't think it's going to
I'm
be
a
scrapped.
run-down
Okay,
solicitor, I think, in
I'll
that
come back to it.
situation.
Yes, ma'am.
The question was, what have you learned from the RHI scheme? And it's really clear that Arlene Foster has learned nothing, because yet again she deflected. Her answer was not about what she has learned and what this has shown her. She straight away went to deflect and start to qualify about facts and what she's going to do
Also
and the
facts
cost
aren't
controls.
Okay.
What have you learned?
So facts aren't important. What I'm saying to you is we should have had the fact finding. In other words, what we've had is the verdict
You wouldn't
before
stand
we
aside
have
for
the
a public
trial.
inquiry.
What
You
we
wouldn't
need,
stand aside for a public inquiry.
yes, I wouldn't stand aside for a public inquiry because it was a Sinn Féin demand. Because it was a Sinn Féin demand that was put there for a particular reason. Why I didn't stand aside is that I wanted to fix it, Noel, and everybody knows that. I wanted to fix the problem. And really, when you are a politician, you should try and fix the issues in front of you instead of walking away. And that's exactly what I was trying to do.
And lady down the front here, one last comment on this one.
Can I just ask, the SDLP, was it not the chairperson of that committee that oversaw
The
that?
DETI committee.
Was it yes, was it not Patsy McGlone was in charge? Could they not? I mean, I sit on committees, I know how committees work. Surely this issue could have been brought to them a lot sooner.
Well, exactly. Any committee can only work on the information that they get.
Exactly.
And it is absolutely clear now that nobody in this audience, nobody watching the show, knew anything about the black hole in our public finances at the last election. And it was kept away from other parties. It was kept between two parties from last February onwards. Now, questions have
Your
to be
party
asked.
knew the same time
No,
as me,
no,
Colin, so
that is not
be
true. That is
factually
not
correct
true.
about it.
That is not
Be
true, and you
factually
know
correct
it's not
about
true.
I do know
The
it's
Sinn Féin and the DUP kept this to themselves, and they went into an election and told nobody. They went into then a negotiation after the election and told nobody. They denied opposition parties, what would become opposition parties, access to the Permanent Secretary of the Finance Department. Now we all know why.
Thank you. We're going to leave that one there. Thank you very much indeed. Now, our second question comes from Thomas Tenner, who's an electrical designer. Thomas.
Is this the first election, and I when there will be significant cross-community transfer of votes?
Cross-community transfer votes is a single transferable vote election, of course, so you can vote for as many candidates as you like in descending order, numerical order. Mike Nesbitt, the Ulster Unionist leader, said that he would be voting outside the tribe, that he would vote in his constituency for an SDLP candidate. He got a lot of flack from it, not least from his own party. Any regrets, Mike?
No, because what I am encouraging people to do is vote Ulster Unionist 1 or 1 or 2, and then vote for any candidate that you trust will do the right thing by your community, by your constituency and by this country. I do think this is the first election in the 96-year history of Northern Ireland where it will be possible and feasible for you, the voters, to sack your government and give a turn to the opposition. There hasn't been an official opposition, since devolution returned in 1998. And of course, previously with the old Stormont rule, the Unionists always won, and it was majority rule. Well, we're not going back there, but you do have a real opportunity this time to say, I am going to vote not orange, not green. I'm going to vote as a referendum on the RHI scandal was handled, and on 10 years of the DUP and Sinn Féin running the government from Stormont Castle.
Yeah.
And if
you
you
didn't
like
sort of discuss any of this with the rest of your party, though, did you? You just sort of went on a solo run.
If you like what they've done, you'll give them another mandate, and if you don't like what they've done,
but your own party doesn't like what you said, Mike.
For change.
Your own party doesn't like what you said. Did you not consult with them before you went on this solo run?
My party does like what I said. Vote Ulster Unionist.
Danny Kennedy doesn't.
Vote for anybody.
Jim Rogers doesn't.
There's nothing inconsistent. Danny is saying, I want to go down the Unionist ticket. That's consistent with me saying, trust the people in your local community. Danny knows his local community. It would be entirely hypocritical of me to vote for the former Speaker in my constituency, given the criticism I levelled at him, and I do not withdraw a single word.
But you didn't discuss it with anyone, you just said it on your own, just a solo run, as they say.
Leadership involves leading, and I am leading.
Usually a bit of consultation as well, I think.
Well, I am leading, Noel, and people know where I stand, and people know what I'm encouraging people to do with their transfers. But more importantly, I am focused on the fact that this is an opportunity to bring about change, away from two parties who only share space, power and responsibility because the law says they have to two parties who will form a partnership of the willing, and that will be transformational for Northern Ireland's political fortunes.
Colin Eastwood, some commentators thought you were rather less than gracious in your response to Mike, especially since 11% of SDLP transfers, for example, in the last election came from Ulster Unionists.
Well,
so it's already happening.
Well, first of all, exactly, it is already happening. The public are way ahead of us here. And what Mike said,
certainly way ahead of you.
What Mike said, well, I've said already, people should vote for change. Hopefully they vote for us in their first preferences, and they should transfer for change. That means transferring across your community for candidates who are willing to make this place work. What Mike said was very brave, and the response to that from some people, I think, was very unfortunate. Those people are behind where the people of Northern Ireland are. People across the north are voting across community, they're transferring across community. I'm an Irish nationalist. Mike Nesbitt's an Ulster Unionist. I won't be any less of an Irish nationalist if I transfer across community. It doesn't affect one iota my nationalism. I think it's the kind of politics that we need to be embracing. Yeah. We have a thing called power sharing. That means that nationalists and unionists have to work together. It's about time we embraced that. It's about time we took our own positions but worked out with others how we can cooperate and partner up to make Northern Ireland work. The problem that we have now, if we vote for Sinn Féin and the DUP, all we can see is red lines, and all that means is direct rule. And if people want to save devolution, if they want to save power sharing, they should vote for parties who are prepared to make this thing work.
Arlene Foster, you say it's dangerous. You've said it's dangerous to transfer out of your tribe.
Well, what I've said is that this election will be very close. All of the polls are saying it, all of the papers are saying it today. It'll be neck and neck between Sinn Féin and the DUP. That being the case, it is dangerous talk, because what you're going to end up for, if you vote for the Ulster Unionist Party and transfer to the SDLP, then you're ensuring that more nationalists are coming into the Assembly instead of more unionists. I make no apology for the fact that I want to see the maximum number of unionists in the Assembly. I'm a unionist.
Confidence for you.
I'm a unionist first and foremost. I'm a unionist first and foremost.
Sorry, Do you not want to see the maximum number of nationalists in the Assembly?
Well, I'll argue every day for United Ireland, but this is not about a border poll. This is about making this place
work. Would you not like to see the maximum number of nationalists in the Assembly? That's just the opposite side of the coin to what Arlene Foster's just said.
Arlene's unionism is so strong and so secure that she's putting out leaflets with a darkened down picture of Gerry Adams in it. She's talking about Gerry Adams more than she's talking about anything else. So these scare tactics are what people are so fed up with. They're why people are sitting at home and not voting. And if people want to change that, they should come out and vote.
Change.
Thank you.
You're also saying a vote for
you
any
did
other
mention him
unionist party is a
32
vote for
times.
Sinn Féin.
You did mention Gerry Adams 12 times and Sinn Féin 32 times in your manifesto launch speech.
Well, I haven't mentioned him. I haven't mentioned him here tonight, but thank you for doing that for me tonight, Noel. Thank you. Thanks, Noel.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
I said thank you very much, Noel, for mentioning that tonight. It's important that the people at home know the consequences of transferring from Ulster Unionists to the SDLP, that you will have more nationalists.
You've got to say, you've got to say.
You will have more nationalists in the Assembly, and that's the reality, because no commentator, no serious commentator is saying that a vote for Mike and you get Colm. If you vote for Mike, you'll get Michelle. That's the reality. You won't get Colm, you get Michelle.
But people voted for you last time and they got Martin McGuinness, and he wrote your resignation letter.
They got a strong unionist leader. That's what they got.
I mean, where would you transfer to?
Well, it won't be the first election the Alliance Party has fought on the basis of cross-community support. We've fought every election on that basis. You got
11% of all transfers in 2016.
Yes, but we draw everyone that we stand as candidates from right across our community, people who would aspire to a United Ireland.
That's not the question. Who would you transfer your vote to outside your party?
The question was, is this the first election that will be fought on that basis? And I'm saying quite clearly, no, not for the Alliance Party. It will not be the first election. And I'm glad that other parties are talking about actually cooperating on the basis of doing so voluntarily, rather than doing it, as others have said, holding their nose to when.
And you don't think it matters whether you transfer to a unionist or a nationalist if you're an Alliance voter?
Of course it doesn't. What matters is that you transfer to someone that you believe is as progressive as the Alliance Party, that wants to build a liberal society in Northern Ireland, and that is willing after the election, because this is what really counts, to actually make the Assembly work for people in Northern Ireland. On that basis, we tell our people to vote Alliance first and then to vote for other candidates who want to progress that same agenda.
So for you, does it matter if Sinn Féin becomes the largest party in the Assembly?
Well, what difference does it make? No one has yet told us what difference it makes. You know, it is amazing. The DUP, when you're at their conference, are all about confident unionism. Unionism has never been stronger. And then every election, unionism has never been in such dire straits. I think it's about time they stopped playing the politics of fear and owned up to the reality that they have nothing else to offer than fear. And I think people are tired of trying to be pulled back into the ditches over this. They want to move forward. They want to vote on the basis of vision. They want to vote on the basis of something positive and constructive. And we'll be telling those people who come out and vote Alliance to transfer to other people who are offering something positive.
Michelle O'Neill, who would you ask your voters to transfer to? And why?
Well, obviously, we're out to seek the largest possible mandate because no one has anything to fear from what I have to offer. Sinn Féin wants to represent everybody. We want to bring our society into the modern era. We want to make sure we deliver rights.
Well, you want a United Ireland, so clearly unionists have something to fear from you.
No one has anything to fear from that. I want United Ireland, surely, but we signed up to the principle of the Good Friday Agreement and the principle of consent. So it's my job as a Republican leader to convince other people
So who would you transfer to?
But let me finish. So it's my job to convince other people that we could be better off United Ireland together and that we could shape that island together. So
who would you transfer to?
But in terms of who I would want to transfer to, well, obviously our own party. But after that,
obviously.
After that, you see any party that's progressive, you see any party that is anti-Brexit, you see any party that's for people's rights.
For example?
See anybody, they're not in the same position as me at Brexit. Let me be very clear about that.
They're not, sorry?
They're not
on
in the same
Brexit,
in relation to Brexit. So I would say to people, vote for progressive parties, vote for people that actually are true to your values. My values of equality, respect, integrity, my values of a new and a great Ireland, my values of anti-corruption, and my values of respect in government.
So I want to come back very quickly. Couple of questions. What do you have to fear from Sinn Féin?
They want to implement their radical Republican agenda, whereas I want to implement my 5-point positive plan for Northern Ireland. Naomi says we have nothing positive to offer Northern Ireland. If you look at our 5-point plan that we had in place last year, we want to see more and better jobs. We want to see an infrastructure that is world class. We want the health system to be reformed. We want a good educational system. A good educational system.
Well, I did. Well,
I spent 3,000 words talking about it at my manifesto launch, but you still want to come back to talk about Sinn Féin and Jerry Adams. So the words are there. I didn't talk about crocodiles at my manifesto launch. That was at my campaign
Oh, sorry,
launch.
You forgot. You wouldn't take questions
at the manifesto launch.
Let us go to our audience. Gentleman at the back there.
I'm probably one of approximately 45% of people who didn't vote last time. 3 of our leaders here have convinced me that I want to vote this time, simply because they're talking in terms of true partnership and true leadership. And 3 out of the 5 have convinced me they want to work together for the sake of Northern Ireland and uniting Northern Ireland. 2 others are hell-bent on dividing the people of Northern Ireland, and I think that's our priority.
Name names, go on.
Well, I think Michelle and Arlene will never see eye to eye, and it's just negative leadership all the way.
OK, and the gentleman here in the blue. And then, go ahead, sir.
Michelle O'Neill, she was saying she wants equality for both sides of the community to help build a united Ireland together, but her party leader, Jerry Adams, came out and called my community orange. I'm not even going to repeat his abusive language towards my community. That's not telling me that you want to reach out.
Okay.
I also disagree with Mike and Colin Eastwood. I believe transferring the vote is important, especially in this election. And I'm a unionist, and I want as most unionists elected and returned as possible, because we've seen in tight councils where you have unionists, if you don't have enough unionists, then people vote and take down the flag or anything that shows our identity. So that is true. So you want
you've had plenty of time. Gentleman there.
I'd like to ask our leaders who on the panel would be willing to sacrifice their wish for a united Ireland or a united kingdom if it meant that all of the community had better healthcare, better education and a better life. Would you sacrifice that aim?
I'll have to make that a rhetorical question for the moment, because we do have to press on. Keep your hands up, ladies and gentlemen. I won't go around everybody, but we will do our best to talk to as many people as possible. Let's move to question number 3, which is from Fergal McFerrin, who is a student representative.
Can you tell us what you believe that our specific priorities should be in the upcoming Brexit negotiations?
Brexit, of course, is on everybody's lips, I suppose. Martin McGuinness said that people are talking about no border of the past, but we've got the border of the future coming at us. What can anyone do, Michelle O'Neill, in this situation to influence what happens at Brexit? We have no voice. We don't even have the Secretary of State on the Brexit committee.
You're absolutely right, and I think that that's why I have engaged in a European level, because it'll not be the British government who dictate the terms of their Brexit. It'll not be up to them, despite what Theresa May says and what James Brokenshire says. So we need to engage with the rest of Europe and the member states that actually will have a vote in terms of what happens next. This is unprecedented, but quite clearly it's catastrophic for the island of Ireland. One issue which I've raised with the Taoiseach is that he needs to step up in the national interest. This will be in two major areas of concern. One, in relation to trade and free movement of people across this island, but secondly, in relation to undermining the Good Friday Agreement. Europe have said that one of the things they're most proud of is the fact that they have played their part in our peace process, and they're not interested in undermining that. So we need to go out, we need to be engaging in Europe. I think it's just disappointing and disgraceful again that the DUP have taken a stance that turns their face against the majority of the people here in the north of Ireland that voted to remain within Europe. We've seen over the last number of weeks that they've also been paid to take that stance. And that is absolutely disgusting. I think it shows that, again, the DUP, in terms of allegations of corruption and arrogance and how they actually conduct themselves in business, that is just not acceptable.
All right. Would you take your Westminster seats to vote on Brexit issues?
I think it's clear that anybody who has taken their Westminster seats, we won't, is the short answer. But it'll not make any difference, because we're not being listened to out there, and all of the MPs that have taken their seats have been ineffective in dealing with this issue.
Naomi Long, you're talking, as many others are, about special status. You want to be still in the single market, still in the customs union, still have the 4 freedoms of movement and others, still have access to structural funds and the right to EU citizenship for anyone born in Northern Ireland. Are you just ignoring the fact that this Brexit referendum took place and Brexit is Brexit?
No, we are dealing with the practical challenges that Northern Ireland face. And so what we are doing is setting out our pitch. Unlike others, we have produced a paper which sets out what we believe is important.
It's la-la land, to coin a phrase.
It's absolutely not. What it is our pitch for what we think Northern Ireland needs. Access, for example, to the customs union is important in terms of the cost of business.
You may think it's what Northern Ireland needs, but there's absolutely no chance of you getting it.
Well, you don't know that, Noel. With all due respect, you won't be sitting around the table when these negotiations take place. I don't need to convince you. I need to convince the Irish government and the 27 other states in the EU.
And the British government who said there's no special status.
Well, the British government can say what they want, but they don't have a plan either, remember. They don't have
They
a
are
plan.
going to be around the table, and they have said no special status.
They don't have a plan that includes Northern Ireland or takes our issues seriously. We do. And so we will be taking that to the other nations within Europe. We will be taking that to the Irish government as we have. And we're listening, Noel, very carefully to those who actually do business on a cross-border basis, to the challenges that they will face. And I believe that we can get special arrangements. Believe it or not, there is goodwill in the European Union for Northern Ireland. People recognise that we are a pro-EU region. They also recognise the importance of Europe in terms of actually helping our peace process. And I think that they are willing to be more flexible than people give them credit for. One of the good things about the EU that's often overlooked is its ability to work around difficult issues and find bespoke solutions. Okay. Now, I don't think it's unreasonable for us to go and fight our corner for bespoke solutions. If you're going to say that the answer to this is to lie down and give up and let Theresa May drag us out and give us a hard border and all of the other things, well, I'm sorry, that's not the kind of politics that I want to do.
Colin Eastwood, you want joint British-Irish rule to give us, assuming there's no government
I want a government
after
here. I want a government here first of all.
I quite
we're not going to get one of those.
Failing that, you've asked for joint British-Irish rule to give us a voice at the Brexit table. That's another delusion, isn't it?
No, it's not, because what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to, if we elect the DUP and Sinn Féin who can't form a government, are we supposed to just say, over to you, Theresa May, you lead this hard Brexit, hard Tory government and destroy all the hopes and dreams of people here, destroy our peace process, destroy our economic progress?
That may be what you have to do,
build up barriers after barriers. That's why I've spent the last number of months travelling around Europe, meeting the heads of our sister parties from across Europe, many of them presidents and prime ministers, to push the case for special status for our citizens here. Remember, the vast majority of people living in Northern Ireland are entitled to be European citizens. That has to be respected. We have to be able to move freely and do business freely across the European Union. And if we don't get that, this will become an economic blackwater and it will threaten our peace process. And anybody who says differently are living in la-la land, as you said.
I put the same point to you, though. The British government has said there will be no special status.
It's not up to the British government. This is up to the 27 member states.
It's between the British government and the EU.
Well, the British government,
negotiations.
The British government don't know what they want. They don't have a clue. Their position changes every single day. What I've been doing is speaking to the Irish government, speaking to governments across Europe to try and press the case for the special status that we require. You don't have to call it special status. You can call it whatever you want. It's about protecting citizens here, about protecting communities and protecting businesses. That's what we have to be involved in. We are the representatives of people here who voted to remain in the European Union. Our job is to protect them, not to vote to get them out. We have to do everything. It's unfortunate, though, that our executive did absolutely nothing when they were in post, unlike the Scottish government or the Welsh government.
Okay, specific priorities was the question.
And we have 10 asks that we published back in September when we produced our own document, A Vision for Northern Ireland Outside of the European Union. And I would make this point to you, Noel, as we sit here at the end of February. The UK government has a white paper looking at Brexit. The Scottish government has a paper. The Welsh government has a paper. The Dublin government has a paper. Our executive produced a blank sheet. We, as the Ulster Unionists, produced a paper. It's got a vision. It's got a plan for how to get there. And then the key asks include things like access to the single market, the common travel area, and then other areas like infrastructure where we're very weak. Remember,
treble investment in infrastructure. The DUP say your proposals are uncosted and untested.
And the DUP also campaigned to come out of the European Union on the basis that we would repatriate billions and billions and billions of sterling annually from Brussels. So where is the negotiation to say to Mrs May, you must take some of that big lump of money and give it to us for things like skills and infrastructure?
Okay.
All that's available on our website. I think it's a terrible shame that we are not negotiating. I took our document to Mrs May in Downing Street. She understands our particular circumstances.
So intently that she mentioned this in the back page of our document. She listened so intently to your programme and what you put forward. She gave us one wee mention on the annex of her proposed document for the way forward. The British government will not dictate the terms of...
I want to bring in Arlene Foster here. Arlene Foster, you sent a joint letter with Martin McGuinness to the Prime Minister talking about access to migrant labour, the need to remain competitive, continued subsidies for agri-food, cross-border crime and peace process opponents must continue to be dealt with. You know, are you pro or anti?
Well, we're very much a pro-Brexit party and have been for 40 years, unlike Mike's party, who changed at the Brexit debate. Well, sorry, Mike changed. His party were mostly for coming out of the European Union.
You don't know that.
Are proudly...
You do not know
well,
that.
maybe you should speak to your members, because I do, and they were for coming out.
What do the public say?
Old friends of yours, of course.
Let me...
Where do you think she gets her... Where do you think she gets her policies from?
All of them are old friends. Well, I'm certainly not taking any of yours. Can I say to you, we campaigned for Brexit. We believe in Brexit. We believe in global UK. We want to be a part of that. We're very positive about it.
You believe in spending other people's money to bring it about?
We believe in flexibility and innovation, something that wasn't existing in the European Union. And we will work with the government, not against the government, to bring about a Brexit that is good for Northern Ireland. And of course, the DUP is the best placed party to bring about a good deal for Northern Ireland because of our influence at Westminster. Michelle says she's not going to go to Westminster. We do have Westminster MPs who have influence.
Will you respond to the claim that taking £400,000 odd from the Constitutional Research Council for the newspaper advertisements in England was despicable?
Well, no, of course it wasn't despicable. We registered, unlike any of the other parties, as a national... well, maybe you tell us about your donations then. We registered as a national party.
Where did this money come from? There's another story out tonight, by the way, that's breaking.
You've had your chance to speak.
About dodgy connections to this money.
Defend that.
Well, it's very clear. We've been entirely open as to where the money comes from.
Where does the money come from?
It comes from the Constitutional Research Council. No, it wasn't. Now, Naomi, you see, that is so...
Arlene.
No, that's
you made
wrong.
a commitment that you would publish.
That's wrong.
You made a commitment to openness
it.
around your donors.
Yes.
In your manifesto in 2016.
That's correct.
Have you published your donors, Arlene?
Yes, we have. We have published the donors. The Constitutional Research Council.
You have published one.
Neither has anyone else, of course. So let's not stick on that. There's a couple of quick comments from the audience.
Not better than
Gentlemen
anyone else. We publish all of ours voluntarily.
Gentleman in the check shirt.
I don't know how anybody can trust a party who took such a large donation to campaign for Brexit while sitting on a damning report on the financial implications of Brexit in Northern Ireland.
OK, that's a fair...
What report?
Gentleman here.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I think Nelson McCausland summed it up in the BBC the other night when he said Brexit at any cost, no matter what the cost was. And I think the DUP have gambled with all our futures.
OK, and this gentleman here.
I think it's interesting how Mike and Colin talk about working together, and I'm quite tempted actually to go for that. But I think Brexit shows how would you work together when you're so different on such a major issue that's facing us.
No, we're not that different.
Well, I guess that joint letter was a sign that there was some preparedness to work together. But again, we've run out of time on that question. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We shall move on to our fourth question. It's from Sarah Owens, who's in marketing. Sarah.
Good evening. Given the failure of the parties to continue running Stormont, is direct rule now inevitable post-election?
Well, that was a big question, of course. Colin Eastwood, you have said that a protracted period of direct rule looks inevitable. Is it so inevitable?
Well, it is only inevitable if people vote for the DUP and Sinn Féin, who've put down red lines everywhere. They've said that they really can't work together. They can't get this deal done. And if we end up with direct rule, it's going to be very, very difficult to put this back together again. That's why we should vote for parties who want to work together on day one. We're not putting down any red lines here. We want to get into government to tackle the issues and challenges around Brexit, to tackle the issues around our health service, not to put up more barriers to progress. The idea of handing back power that was so hard fought for to the British government, who are intent on destroying our health service, intent on taking us into a hard Brexit, putting up barriers across this island, I think it would be a real shame. And we're in a battle over the next couple of days to protect devolution, to protect power sharing, and don't let anybody tell you, don't let any commentator or pollster tell you that you do not have the power. If people come out and vote in this election, they can maintain power sharing, they can maintain devolution, and they can stop direct rule.
Michelle O'Neill, you've said at one point that there were no red lines, and then Pat Sheehan, of course, your MLA, said, well, of course, there's the Irish Act, there's the legacy issues, there's the Bill of Rights, a whole list of red lines. Which is your position?
Well, I've always said that we won't negotiate our red lines in public, but of course everybody has red lines, and I think it's interesting that it's only Sinn Féin that ever gets asked, do we have red lines? Colm said he doesn't have any red lines. Is the United Ireland a red line for you, Colm, if you went into government with the Ulster Unionist Party? So I just think it's a nonsense.
I think we're talking slightly more short-term than that.
What's this got to do with forming a government?
Let's talk slightly more short-term.
So you're not now going to... Hold on, so as Michelle
you're not going to get
said, she's not going to
a week of the election.
United Ireland.
The point I'm making is about principles.
You're not going to get that within a week of the election. So let's talk about possibility of forming a government.
Yes, and I'll come back to that. And we'll come
back
to
that is the question. I don't want you to come back to it. That's the question.
If you let me finish. So
well,
the public will have their say on Thursday. I'm asking for the strongest possible mandate so Sinn Féin can go into the negotiations with the strongest hand to deal with the issues.
To demand what?
There's no public appetite out there for a new agreement. We don't need a new agreement. What we need, and the reason that part of the reason that we're in the scenario that we're in today, is because there's been a failure to implement what's been previously agreed. Issues like the Irish Language Act, the Bill of Rights, everything, legacy issues, all those key issues that are really, really important for society. So we need to see those things implemented. I'm not seeking a new agreement, but I will come at, and I have my negotiation team ready to go. We want to find a way forward. Nobody has worked harder than Sinn Féin to make the institutions work in the last 10 years.
But you won't negotiate as long as Arlene Foster is the nominated First Minister.
Well, nobody could...
If they become the biggest party.
I have always said it's not for me to dictate who will lead the DUP, but it is for me to dictate...
Oh, so you will negotiate if Arlene Foster...
Who we will go into government with. So I'll come at it with a good heart, wanting to find a way forward. I want to bring politics into the new era. I want to have a new style politics, a new style of government.
Let me just... This is absolutely straight, this is important. So if the DUP is the biggest party in this election and Arlene Foster is nominated as First Minister, you will nominate a Deputy First Minister and you will go into negotiations.
No, I said I can't dictate who leads the DUP, but I can suggest or dictate who we go into government with.
That's kind of the same thing, isn't it?
I just said I can't go into government with Arlene Foster in the position of First or Deputy First Minister whilst there is a cloud hanging over her. Right. The full investigation needs to report. But the public will have their say. You see if Arlene wants to find a way forward. You see if power sharing is to work.
But if the public have their say and make the DUP the biggest party, then you're not letting the public have their say.
Excuse me, say that again?
If the people elect the DUP as the biggest party and the DUP puts forward Arlene Foster, which is every reason to believe they would, then you are not listening to the people if you refuse to go into negotiations.
And I'm also very true to the principles of the Good Friday Agreement. I would like to see all parties in the executive, I would like to see all parties working together on the principles of power sharing. You see, if we get back to the principles of the Good Friday Agreement, equality and respect and integrity, actually through power sharing and actually being through to that partnership.
But you won't respect the DUP mandate.
I can respect their mandate. I can respect who they return. I can respect who the public return and who leads the DUP. But I can't go into government whilst there's a shadow of hanging over Arlene Foster, and no other party here would do that.
Is that a reasonable position, Naomi Long?
Well, no, I don't think it is. We call for Arlene voluntarily to stand aside without prejudice in order to allow an inquiry to take place.
And she's not going to do that.
She's not going to do that, but it's not for us then to dictate the outcome after this election. We have said this is not going to be about personalities and people or even about parties. It's going to be about policy and it's going to be about principles. We were very clear in the run-up to the last election, as we have been in this election, that we do have red lines, and we've been open and honest about what those are, because we want people to understand our reasons for deciding either to go into government or not to go into government. They have a right to know what our bottom line is, and so we've been open and honest about that at both occasions. What I want to see is not an extended period of direct rule. It's not inevitable. People have a choice to make on Thursday that can make sure that that doesn't happen. And let's be very clear, it is not desirable, because what you need to have, and what we have found, I think, as a result of all of the discussion that we've had here even tonight, what we need is more accountable government, and we will not get that from Westminster. We will get that from electing the right people to go to Stormont, to represent the people and to do the job to the best of their ability, and not power sharing, because I know what Michelle said about not returning to the way power sharing had been. The problem is we've never really tried power sharing. We've tried power carve-up and it hasn't worked. Now is the time to try power sharing, where people actually go into government together, work together collaboratively, as opposed to how it has been, where they use their departments like fiefdoms and don't take any cognizance whatsoever of what's going on in the departments beside them. That can't continue. It isn't stable. It has failed over and over again. We need a transformation in attitude as much as in practice.
Mike Nisbet, is direct rule inevitable?
I do not believe direct rule is inevitable because I'm not fatalistic about the result. I'm very encouraged by the gentleman who says he's in the 45% who may now decide to cast a vote. Okay. And if enough people do, we will see change.
Let me phrase the question differently. If Sinn Féin and the DUP are the two largest parties, is direct rule inevitable?
It seems very, very likely. But even if it comes, Noel, it doesn't fix anything because we have to get back to 19 years ago. The Ulster Unionist Party stretched itself very hard for that agreement, and it was based, and you can read it in the very first substantive paragraph, it was based on an opportunity for a fresh start, was the phrase, for reconciliation, tolerance, building trust between the two traditional communities, demonstrating mutual respect. That will have to come, whether it's in this election or the next one. We will have to show each other.
Sure, but we're talking about
respect.
a 3-week period after Thursday in which there has to be an executive and a government set up.
And it depends on who votes and how they vote on Thursday.
Yeah, and would you go for some kind of, there's been talk about having direct rule ministers responsible to an assembly. Is that a reasonable proposition?
These are all propositions that only need to be discussed if people do not vote for change. And I encourage them to look at the last 10 years and decide that they want better for themselves and for their children, and they want to build a properly shared future.
Talking about red lines, Arlene Foster, you've said that your demands will be proportionate to the demands of Sinn Féin. What does that even mean?
Well, our position is very clear. We want devolution back up and running again as quickly as possible because, unlike the others, I actually think that we have achieved in this past 10 years. Stability has brought achievements to Northern Ireland. In the last mandate, we were able to create 40,000 new jobs. We were able to see our health waiting list go down by 18% when Simon Hamilton left the Department of Health. We have seen our infrastructure improve. We have seen more tourists come to Northern Ireland. So it's quite wrong to say that stability and the devolution that we had didn't bring success to Northern Ireland. I want to see that back as quickly as possible so that we can get back into the positive way forward for Northern Ireland. But I suppose it's entirely a matter for Sinn Féin as to what they come forward with. If they come forward with a long list of demands, and we're not quite sure what they're going to come forward yet until after the election is over, then of course we will want to be proportionate in relation to what we want for our community. Because
what might those demands of yours be?
You're there to represent the entire community,
yes,
not just your community or their community.
What might those demands
and that's why we want devolution back and running to create those jobs which we promised in our manifesto, our 50,000 new jobs that we want in this mandate. That's what it's all about.
It's not really a red line, though, is it?
No, we're not talking about red lines. I've just said no. I don't have red
demands.
lines.
I want what they might be.
Well, of course, we have to see what Sinn Féin are going to be asking for in relation to these. What I want to see is devolution back and running again, because that's what the people of Northern Ireland want.
Well, what I win in this election, what Sinn Féin wins in this election, we win for everybody. I'm only interested in governing for absolutely everybody. Equality, respect and integrity in government. That's what I'm about. So I'm not interested in 5 things for unionism and 5 things for nationalism. I'm interested in making sure we actually
None of it will happen, Arlene Foster, if you want to remain as First Minister. The negotiations won't happen at all. You could, if you were acting in the interests of all the people of Northern Ireland, you might say, all right, I'll sit back for 6 weeks.
Well, first of all, not a single vote has been counted in this election. I do agree with Mike in relation to that. So it's important that people come out and vote on Thursday for what they want to see moving forward. And they have a very clear choice. It's whether they want a DUP positive election for Northern Ireland, recognising the values of the Northern Ireland people, or whether they want a Sinn Féin Republican plan. I certainly think that we can move Northern Ireland forward. It's just whether there's the will from others.
OK, couples. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Mrs Foster, you've occasionally mentioned your worries about what Sinn Féin might do if they were First Minister. But surely you hold the same veto if you're Deputy First Minister as they held over your plans when they were Deputy First Minister. So what's the difference?
Well, I'm not actually talking about if they become First Minister. I'm talking about if they win the election, then they will push ahead in relation to their radical Republican agenda in terms of what they want to do. What they want to do for Northern Ireland. They will use their mandate to go to our own government and argue for a border poll, for example, which I think would be hugely divisive and destabilising for Northern Ireland. We've seen the way it has destabilised Scotland, this constant issue of independence, and I think it would be wrong for Northern Ireland if we had that as well.
The only thing that will change is that the DUP's ego will be wounded. And I don't think the public care about that. They care about health and
I want to bring the audience in,
education.
Naomi. There's a gentleman over here.
I think the fact that less than 2 years after a so-called Fresh Start agreement, that we're in an early election is a testament to Sinn Féin and DUP's inability to work together.
OK, and this gentleman?
We're talking about 10 years of stability. It's not been 10 years of stability for Northern Ireland's environment. We've had 10 years where we've now wound up with the biggest illegal landfill in Europe. And that really does come back to the door of the Environment Minister, who in 2008 rejected recommendations for environmental reform. That's you.
Yeah. Are you blaming me for an illegal land dump? Are you serious?
No, I'm saying that the failures of environmental governance do go back to your decision 2008.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
Yes, they do. Yes,
no,
they really do.
No, they really,
Arlene,
don't.
Michelle has clearly stated that the mandate of the people will be listened to when they go back into government. What about the mandate of everyone across Northern Ireland? Are you going to listen to the mandate of everyone else in the terms of the LGBT rights of the Irish Language Act? Are you going to listen to the people of Northern Ireland?
Of course.
And I'd also like to point out that the stability in the First Minister's office for the last number of years has been Martin McGuinness.
Well, OK.
That's your view. You're entitled to it. I think that the stability of the First Minister's office was a joint effort and not just one man.
Let's this gentleman here.
So I noted earlier Mike talked about how you would vote down on the candidates you trust, and I know you're an East Belfast man, so you're saying that with that wide and varied selection of unionists in that area that you would trust a nationalist. And I think that's ironic because Mike doesn't trust the other unionists, and I think hopefully Mike will find on the 2nd of March that unionists don't trust Mike because he doesn't show direction on moral issues, on Brexit, and he doesn't even consult his own party whenever he talked about transfer.
And this gentleman here.
There has been a lot of talk tonight about United Ireland and about Sinn Féin being the leader, the Sinn Féin leader being the First Minister and so forth. Am I not right in thinking at the Good Friday Agreement, the question of the Constitution of Northern Ireland was settled?
Here, here. Yeah.
OK.
Absolutely.
Gentlemen.
What I'd like to ask is that, I mean, the gentleman there said that the Good Friday Agreement said that the constitutional question was settled in the Good Friday Agreement. It was settled under the principle of consent, which cuts both ways. Are we going to be dragged out of the European Union because the people here voted in a majority to, you know,
well, it was a national vote. That's the point, isn't it? So that's you have to accept the overall vote. Yes, sir.
Arlene talks about a radical Republican agenda. If that means supporting marriage equality and the Irish language, then sign me up there, because I'm for that.
Okay. Go ahead, sir. You go ahead.
Yes, Mike, you're voting in East Belfast, and you said you'll transfer out to other candidates who are progressive and willing to do with things. Will you be voting for Naomi?
I have no doubt. I will.
There you go. It's a straight answer. My goodness.
The issue of LGBT rights has been talked about a bit already. One of the biggest problems in the last 10 years has been the abuse of the petition of concern. Now, Arlene now tells us she wants to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So, Arlene, will you tell us tonight, will you not use the petition of concern the
Which
next
you've
time?
used, I think, 96 times, is that?
Yeah. Will Arlene now commit to not using the petition of concern on equal marriage?
Well, Colin, let me be very clear. I can see we have a very balanced audience in tonight. Let me be very clear in relation to
completely balanced.
Let me be
no
very.
expense spared to get a balanced audience.
I'm sure. Let me be very clear in relation to the petition of concern. The SDLP and Sinn Féin used the petition of concern to block welfare reform. They cost the people of Northern Ireland £174 million.
We kept £174 million in the pockets of the most vulnerable in society.
£160,000 per day for 3 years. That's how they use the petition of concern.
They use it to protect the most vulnerable. That's what it was designed for.
They want to use the petition of concern when it suits them.
Yeah.
But unionism is not allowed to use the petition
Well,
of concern.
I'm just glad that when you asked
issues.
the question, Arlene didn't bang the podium the way she banged the table when we asked the question in the negotiations about the Justice Ministry when we were talking to them last May. Because when we asked very clearly, if, as agreed under the Fresh Start, so this was something that Arlene signed up to, they would use the petition of concern only
I'm going to have to stop you there.
purpose.
We have run out of time.
wouldn't do
I'm
it.
very sorry. It's amazing how quickly the time passes when you're enjoying yourself. That's where we have to leave the leaders' debate. You can see a full list of candidates for Thursday's Assembly election on the BBC Northern Ireland News website. That's bbc.co.uk/newsni. The Green Party, the People Before Profit and the TUV will give their reaction on a specially extended BBC Newsline at 10:25. Thanks to our guests, our audience and of course to you at home for watching. From here, a very good night.